Hey everybody, Leah Klett here with the Christian Post, and my guest today is author Judy Henderson. She shares her absolutely fascinating story in the new book, When the Light Finds Us. You were a mother, a law-abiding citizen, and you're wrongfully imprisoned. And you open your book with this. Take me back to the moment this happened, to the moment you found out you were convicted, you were going to be serving a life sentence for a crime you didn't commit.
The moment I was convicted, that's whenever the judge sent or told me that in the courtroom. So my parents were there, my children were not. So that was it. Well, I can't even put into words, Leah, the devastation that you feel knowing your life has just been taken. There are no words to express that deep sadness and that deep pain, especially whenever you hear your mother wailing in the background and you can't hold her, you can't touch her, you can't comfort her in any way. And but I knew at that moment I had to be strong. I had to act like I got this. Don't worry, mother, I'm fine. I'm the oldest of eight kids. So I always had to be the strong one. So it wasn't something that I just had to learn all of a sudden instantly. And so from that moment on, then they had to decide what sentence I would get, life without parole for 50 years or the death penalty.
Mm.
So we had to wait for the jury to go back out and come back in and call me back into the courtroom to let me know if I would live or die. But even that, even a life without parole for 50-year sentence, which is what I received, that is, I found out, a slow death.
You were sort of a victim of just a series of really unfair, horrific events. What happened?
Whenever this, what led me into this scene or this, to me, it's still not, sometimes it's not real. It was like watching something in a movie when the crime occurred that evening. But I was a battered woman to begin with, so that started conditioning me. My mother was a battered woman. It was a generational curse that was on our family, that we have since been able to break. Thank you, Jesus. And I was already mentally conditioned to want this white little picket fence and believe the gentleman that I was with. And I was able to divorce my husband after 12 years because I was afraid it was going to be, his anger was going to be turned toward our daughter and our son. So that did give me the strength and the courage to leave that marriage, but then it wasn't 6 months later.
Hmm.
And after I had been in the psychiatric ward, and in September, the divorce was in June, psychiatric ward September, it was very fast. And then I met my co-defendant in April because was told to move out of state or out of town where my family was. Um, and he moved into my home. Unbeknownst to me, when I came home from my business one day, he was there with packed bags. And he said I needed him. I needed him to help put our family together so we could be one happy family. And then the murder happened in July. He moved in June. The murder occurred the middle of July. And I did not know this. He had this other side of him. Had been in the ministry.
Mm.
He was a real estate broker. And so he was very suave and debonair, very polite, very convincing. And I had no idea, none whatsoever, that there was this other side of him that was even capable of doing such a thing. And my family, they were Christians. So even they were fooled by him. Yeah. Yeah.
Was there a particular moment or experience in prison that really reaffirmed your hope for justice?
Whenever I came to prison, for one, it was like being dropped off into a foreign country because everything was so different. So the language, the dress, the rules, everything. But I'm going to tell you, Leah, I was very, very angry to begin with at God for a while, and he and I had to come to terms with a lot of different things. I had to learn a lot of reasons why I got myself in that situation, how I got myself in that situation. And then there was a 3-day Christian retreat put on for just 12 lifers as a pilot program. And whenever I went to that, I saw there is so much power and love. You know, God speaks of love in the Bible, all through the Bible. He loved us so much that he died for us. So whenever I saw the enormity of how much love was in this 3-day retreat and how these volunteers, they didn't have to give up their time to come in there and speak with us or be with us or bring us food or be kind to us and love on us. They chose to do this because they had the love of God in them. And that gave me hope.
Mm.
And whenever I started that journey, that spiritual journey again, because I was a Christian, but then, of course, being married and going through what I went through and meeting my co-defendant, I slid backwards. I'm not going to just sit here and painted this great little picture. It wasn't great. But whenever I rededicated my life to God, it was like Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, plans for a future. And I kept that verse above my cell mirror all the years that I was there, because I knew prison was not what God had planned for me. While I was there, he had a purpose. And I was blessed and gifted enough to find that purpose during those years, those 36 years of incarceration. And when the light finds us, it helps enlighten everybody on how do you get through a situation like this? How do you still become a dedicated mother behind bars?
Yeah.
How do you reach out and even want to start helping other people?
Mm-hmm.
It's because God showed me what my purpose was and why I was there. And it helped navigate me through the ups and downs and the valleys and the mountains. And I came out and I continue helping others. I continue helping mothers. I continue helping people get out of prison. And this is something that I will do until the day I take my last breath.
Judy, how are you able to see this as part of a God's greater purpose for you instead of succumbing to bitterness and anger? I think that would be sort of the default response for most people.
Sure. And that's very true, because anger is also a very powerful emotion. So I came to the conclusion, there's two things you can do with anger. You can either get bitter or you can get better. And I chose better, because the anger was only hurting me. It didn't bother anybody else. Nobody in that prison cared that I was angry. Everybody was angry.
Mm-hmm.
That was a common emotion. And I had to raise myself up with the help of Jesus Christ. And I had to believe that he already gave me all the tools that I would need the day he created me to navigate through whatever was put in my path. And he did. My stepfather used to tell me, he was a minister. He said, Judy, quit asking for more strength, because you're just going to get more trials to build your strength. And I said, what? And I thought, well, that makes sense if you think about it. And he taught me that God gives each of us everything we need, because he already knows what we're going to go through. Mm-hmm. So let's use the tools he gave us, and let's have the best life that we can possibly have and reach out and help others do the same.
Mm-hmm. What was it like the moment you found out you were pardoned?
Oh my gosh. Well, of course, I went to the floor on my knees, because it was such a surprise. And I did not actually think that any governor would do something like this, especially in his first year of a 4-year term. That's just something that's never done. It made history in Missouri, and I've never known any governor to ever do that, because most of them are afraid it's going to hurt their political career. But so to have to actually have the governor come and standing behind me, unbeknownst to me, until I was told to turn around, I didn't even know why I was in that visiting room. And whenever I saw him, tears just streamed down my face, and I fell to the ground on my knees. And Governor Greitens was so kind and so gentle, and he just took me by the shoulders and he said, Judy, he said, it's good news. It's good news for you. And I was speechless. I couldn't say anything. He said, I just want you to know why I'm here, and that's to commute your sentence. And we're going to sit down here at this table, and I'm going to read something to you. So he read me my commutation, and whenever he said, I want to apologize, from the state of Missouri for all the suffering that you had to endure.
Mm.
And he said, so today I'm going to commute your sentence to time served, immediate release. And I still get chills just thinking about it because I can visualize how that was, how that felt.
Judy, what changes need to be made to the criminal justice system to prevent wrongful convictions like yours?
One of the things that occurred with my case that cannot occur anymore because of the courts, they was a conflict of interest, having one attorney represent two co-defendants on the same case.
Mm.
Because you can't give one a fair trial and not the other one, because one can't testify to the truth whenever it's going to affect the other co-defendant and the attorney's other client. So I went to trial first, so I could not take the stand and be honest and tell the truth about this because it would hurt his other client, which was my co-defendant. So for one, never have the same attorney. I don't know about in other states. I know in Missouri they cannot do that any longer. But I know too that they need to allow women to always be able to use a defense, which I ended up leading the legislation on that for battered women as a battered woman's defense whenever they're involved in a case, in a murder trial, even in a robbery or drugs or whatever. If they're battered women, they're already conditioned and from learned behavior and years of abuse of thinking a certain way and wanting to please people, wanting to be a caretaker. And so those circumstances need to be taken into consideration.
Judy, so many people, so many systems failed you. How were you able to get to a place of forgiveness against a justice system that failed you, a man that failed you? How were you able to forgive them?
Well, you know what, Leah, God forgave us. He died on the cross and suffered enormously for us. And he forgave every one of us before we were ever born for any sins that we would ever commit or anything that we would do against another. And whenever I think back and know the suffering that he did for us, how could I not also, loving him as my father, not forgive others as he did? And I did not want anger. I did not want bitter. I did not want Satan to think that he had that kind of power over me to where I would not want to reach out and help other people. And so that's what my mission is. That's what my purpose is, to advocate for those women still incarcerated and to help them whenever they come home with their children or their housing or their food or whatever their needs are, because I work for an agency now where I am privileged and honored and humbled to be able to do that.
When the light finds us is such a powerful title. What does light mean to you now? What does it symbolize for you?
Light to me symbolizes freedom. It symbolizes, you see butterflies that are free, and I love that. I love that because the light, I was in such darkness, for many years without even realizing it. And then whenever I was sent into prison, I mean, that is one of the darkest places you can be. And so whenever I thought, what's the title going to be? I thought, light. Light has to be in there somewhere. And then I wanted the book cover to look a certain way. I wanted a beautiful flower that was able to grow through the barbed wire that surrounds it. And so everything on the cover of that book, When the Light Finds Us, has significance.
Judy, if you could speak to someone directly facing what seems like an impossible situation, what would you say to them?
I would say, don't give up hope. I said, I would like to tell them that there is always a way out. You just have to be still and know that I am God. Sometimes we just have to listen. We just have to listen for his voice and his guidance. And you can't keep going in the same direction if you keep running into roadblocks. That is your sign, to go a different direction. So don't give up hope. Know that there's always a way to get around a situation, and God is there to give you those directions. You just have to trust him and stand on Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, so let him show you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more Christ-centered journalism.